Hey Guitar Geeks, Guitar Guts back, and today I'm going to show you various methods for checking the neck relief on your guitar. The neck relief is a specification that can change due to weather or temperature fluctuations, and it's one that you probably should have set correctly before you start messing with pickup height or string height, because changing the neck relief can change those two settings as well. When the string on your guitar vibrates, it needs a little bit more room to vibrate in the center of the fretboard than it does on the ends, because that's where it vibrates in the largest arc. If you don't have enough clearance there, you could get string buzz, and if you have too much clearance there, the frets in the center of the fretboard can be a little harder to play on than they need to be. And so the neck needs to be fairly straight, but it does need, just usually on most guitars, it needs just a little bit of a bow in the center of the neck, where the fretboard is bowed down away from the strings, just a tiny amount. Now, if you've got tools available to you, there's some good ways to check this that are fairly accurate. But if you don't, if you're stuck out at the guitar store and you're trying to buy a guitar, or you're just looking at a friend's guitar to check it for them, you can just use the visual method to sight it. And all you need to do that is lower your line of sight down level with the fretboard and look down it to see if it's straight. You may have to adjust your focus until you're seeing the fretboard and not the guitar body. And sometimes it's hard to see because the bridges can get in your way and you may have to shift a little bit left or right. And you can check the bass side and the treble side of the neck. And you'll be able to see, even tiny variations in back bow or up bow of the neck. You'll definitely be able to see if there's a large back bow in the neck, or if it has a large amount of up bow. And you definitely want to check to see if that guitar had a functional truss rod, if you did see a large bow in the neck. But that's a good method to use that's fairly quick. It can give you a rough estimate of what needs to be done. And some people even rough it in by changing the truss rod adjustment before they start measuring it, just by eyeballing it like that. If you have some tools available to you, though, there's some much more accurate methods of doing it that'll give you a better picture of exactly what the measurements are on your guitar. One way is to simply use a straight edge and lay it down in the center of the fretboard, and you'll be able to see underneath it whether there's any light shining through beneath the straight edge. If there's light coming through down here at the bottom in the center of the fretboard, then you might have too much neck relief. If you see a large gap between the straight edge and the frets, and if there's an up bow in the neck, you can easily see it because the straight edge will rock like a seesaw on the center of the fretboard, and it won't be setting on the ends where it should be. So you definitely don't want to see that, because you're going to get string buzz if that's the case. I find that the straight edge is hard to measure underneath, so I usually don't use a feeler gauge or anything like that to try to get under it to check the distance between it and the frets. It's just a visual thing. My preferred method, and probably the most accurate one, is to use a capo at the front at the headstock up here on the first fret. I install that there to keep the string down against the frets. And what I'm doing basically when I do this is making a straight edge out of the string itself. So I've got the capo installed up here at the first fret, and I'm pressing down with my fingers down here on one of the frets at the end of the fretboard. And then you can use two different methods to measure the gap between the strings and the frets. You can use a feeler gauge of various sizes, and you're usually looking for a gap of about 10 thousandths, but some people prefer more or less than that. Some guitars need more or less than that, and you should probably check the specifications that came with your guitar from the factory to see what you need there. But you can use a feeler gauge. Be sure you're putting it in straight and not angling it too much, and what you're looking for is to see whether that feeler gauge moves the string when you put it underneath there. If it's pushing up on the string, you don't have quite as much clearance as the feeler gauge that you've chosen. And if it slides under way too easily and you can step down a few or step up a few and it still doesn't touch it, then you've got too much of a gap there. I like these little string action gauges because they have a scale on the bottom that allows you to see thousandths of an inch, and it steps up, and that's perfect for setting right behind the string. And then you can see from the top how much of a gap that you have there. It steps up. and that's probably the easiest method for checking it. If you find out you've got too much relief, you probably need to tighten your truss rod. If you find out you've got too little relief, you probably need to loosen it a little bit until you get it just right. And you can always adjust it to taste until your guitar is playing exactly like you want it to. Well, I hope that helps. I hope that gives you some tips on how to check your neck relief, and maybe that will make your guitar play a little better and let you enjoy it a little more. Thanks for stopping by. See you later.